Welcome back to Tea in the Garden, where ancient wisdom brews with modern magic. I'm Lauren,
I'm Savannah.
And I'm Priscilla.
and today we are stirring the pot a little bit deeper than usual. We are diving into a topic that cracks open the foundations of what we've been taught to believe.
That history, as we might know it, is not just incomplete, it's intentionally misleading and at times completely wrong.
We're aiming to take you beyond what you have learned in school, in the textbooks, and into a timeline that has been intentionally erased and forgotten. And we are going to talk about why.
We're talking forgotten civilizations, spiritual technologies, and the evidence that we've been here before, more evolved than we've ever been told.
So brew your tea, settle into the garden with us, and get ready to question everything you thought you knew. History is a lie.
Because the past is not dead. It's just been hidden and forgotten, and it's time to remember. Let's
Let's spill the tea. Hee hee.
We have three main topics today. We're talking about how civilization has been evolved far before they told us it was. Humans have been technologically capable for thousands and thousands of years earlier than what we've been taught. And there's a reason for that. We're talking about the pyramids, of course, we have to. And then we're talking about things that are centric to the states. We're going to be looking at the old buildings around us in our societies, in our neighborhoods. And my goal with that is when you see a stone building from this day forward, you'll never see it the same again.
dun 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 dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So, Priscilla, I know that you've done some deep dives into ancient civilizations before. So, could you kind of share what stands out to you, since that kind of covers a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, and maybe some of the wisdom and technology that these cultures actually had?
Yes, absolutely. So I have mentioned previously on some of our episodes, but what started my spiritual awakening was actually this topic, which I think is so funny and cool. It wasn't for me a directly spiritual thing that kind of blew open my mind or opened my paradigm. It was actually history. I was so closed off to the idea that the government, people in power, education systems would lie to us. I really had like such a naivety about that. And I thought, like, why? Why would they? What's the point? Why would they? Like, of course they're telling us the truth. And when I was living in Ecuador, the first book that I picked up that was recommended to me by my dear brother was a book by Graham Hancock called Fingerprints of the Gods: Evidence of Earth's Lost Civilization. And this was the book that was my doorway, because throughout this 800-page thick, very, very dense intellectual book, he opens a whole different way of seeing history, and with so much evidence that it's impossible to refute, in my opinion. So that's what I kind of wanted to introduce today. This topic is obviously very broad and there's so much we're not going to be able to cover, but I hope that what we do get to talk about is something that starts to open your eyes a little bit more and to open your mind a little bit more as a listener, and just allows you to start digging into certain areas that might be of more interest to you. So the kind of entire theme of his work as an archaeologist is that there was an advanced human civilization much, much earlier than we have been taught. In, the textbooks of grade school, high school, college, we learn a very specific narrative. We learn a narrative that has been the narrative for decades, that has been part of the archaeological community for decades. And sadly, that narrative is not only extremely outdated, but entirely misleading. And there has been ample, ample evidence discovered in the last decades that has been quite literally thrown out and or hidden by the archaeological community. Why? Because for the very same reason that the scientific community throws out things or the American Medical Association throws out data, it challenges the very foundations of everything it's built on. It
They don't
challenges
want to be wrong.
yeah, it challenges the very foundations of the very people sitting on the board of these things, whom entire work and success and financial dependence is upon these papers that are no longer relevant anymore, these findings that are no longer true anymore, right? So here is what we're going to start with, because there's so much to say here, but we're going to open up with something called the Piri Reis map. The Piri Reis map is something that I'm actually going to put a visual here in the YouTube video. So if you want to see the visual, head over to the YouTube for that. The Piri Reis map is one of the oldest maps in the world. And this map was created by Piri Reis. He was a cartographer and an admiral in the Ottoman Empire. Drawn in 1513, this map was made. Now, why is this map so interesting and so important when it comes to the evidence of this ancient interconnected civilization? What's very fascinating is that this map, again, drawn in the 1500s, shows Antarctica without ice. This map depicts the entirety of the topography of Antarctica without ice.
I feel like we could do a whole podcast on
Antarctica, yeah.
Yeah.
Why is this so interesting? If you're not a total geek like me and remember and know all these things about geography off the top of your head, Antarctica is said to have been covered by ice for a very, very long period of time, right? Since the Ice Age, if not earlier. And according to, right, the modern narrative, it shouldn't be possible to know what is under that ice because intelligent humans had never been to Antarctica, right? According to what we are being told. Now, what's so interesting is that Antarctica was not discovered until 1820, according to our modern narrative. Now, this map, and while it's cross-referenced, is completely accurate to what we now have used technology to prove, right? Radar and things that can actually show us what the land under this ice actually looks like. Now, how would this map, hundreds of years before we have ever discovered Antarctica, have an accurate depiction of Antarctica? Now, the theory, the implication of this is that this map is based on much older maps that we no longer have access to, maps that were created by advanced civilizations that had not only navigational knowledge, cartographical knowledge, but were traversing the entire Earth, that were traversing the seas, that were traversing continents. This, in and of itself, is extremely groundbreaking because humans were said to have not been able or capable of doing this up until the more recent few thousand years, okay? And this would have had to happen over 13,000 years ago. Why is that? Because up until that point, the Ice Age hit around this point, the precession of the equinoxes. When the precession of the equinoxes happened, the entire Earth was, right, covered in ice. All this movement started to happen, and this is a very key period in human history because the certain continents were connected through ice, certain land masses were completely wiped out or covered, right? A lot of changes started to happen. So this civilization had to have been traversing, right, the Earth before Antarctica was covered, before a lot of these passages were completely closed or covered by ice. And that was around 13 to 14,000 years ago at the earliest. Now, this is about 3 times as old as we're being told advanced human civilization has existed. 3 times as old. And this is a really, really, really big deal because it changes the very way we understand ourselves. And why this topic I find is so important spiritually speaking, like why are we all talking about this? Why are we all caring about this as medicine women, as spiritual seekers, as teachers of the mystical? Because our history is everything to our consciousness, right? We need to know where we have come from in order to properly know who we are and where we want to go next. The biggest tool that conquerors, dictators, tyrants use is the erasure of history to conquer a people, right?
The burning of Alexandria.
Yeah, burning of Nalanda University, things we started to talk about last episode, right? When we erase a culture's knowledge, we erase the culture. We erase the wisdom. We erase the spiritual connection, right? We erase the consciousness in some ways of that very culture. So a few other examples I will give, and then we will get on to some more details from Lauren on Egypt and Gobleki Tepi, which is some really, really, really mind-blowing examples there. I wanted to mention a few other really, really strong evidences. In case you're skeptical, you're like, what do these girls know? What are they talking about? I really invite you to look into these specific sites yourself and see the evidence yourself, because that's what it took for me. I don't care what somebody else says, right? I need to know myself. I need to see it myself. Then I'm going to be convinced. And that's totally fair. That's valid. So some of the really, really important, significant temples and pyramids and sacred sites that give further evidence to such a advanced or globally connected human civilization predating the Ice Age, predating the precession of the equinoxes when the Ice Age happened, are the Giza Plateau, which I'm going to let Lauren talk about next, Tiwanaku and Pumapunku in Bolivia. So Bolivia has some really significant sites. I'm hoping to visit them myself one day. They're on my bucket list. They're by Lake Titicaca, and they are temple sites that have extremely precise cutting of the stones. So much so, just like in the Giza Plateau, where the precision of the cutting of the stones is so perfect that even our technology cannot cut a stone to such a perfect 90-degree angle. They still do not know how the stones were cut to such incredible mathematical precision. It shouldn't be possible, and yet it's there. What's interesting across these sites, whether we're looking in Bolivia, we're looking at Teotihuacan, Mexico, we're looking at the Giza Plateau, we're looking at Ellora and the temples in India, we're looking at Angkor Wat in Cambodia. These are some of the other examples I would look into. These structures are so mathematically perfect and are constructed by such materials that it should be impossible to have transported them, to have constructed them with such precision, to have moved them from point A to point B where they were put. And all of these things have been confounding, you could say, right? Confounding scientists and archaeologists for thousands of years. And what Graham Hancock starts to point to in all of this connection is that one big factor that connects all these sites: perfect astrological alignment. What is so interesting, and this one I think is going to be really cool for everyone that loves astrology listening to this. I don't even know if Lauren and Sav, you know this, but what's crazy is that, for example, the structures of Tiwanaku and Pumapunku in Bolivia, as well as Teotihuacan, Mexico, are laid out perfectly in alignment with one constellation. Can you guess?
Orion.
Yes. Do you know what else is laid out perfectly to the precision of Orion? The pyramids of Giza. And do you know what else? What's so crazy about this is not, oh, okay, they're laid out as Orion. They're laid out as Orion 15,000 years ago. The exact mapping of where Orion would have been 15,000 years ago. There is no other time period that these constructions can match. So you can actually date these structures, these megalithic structures, based on the exact timing of when they were made, because there is no other alignment of Orion that would sync up with them perfectly other than this exact time period.
Well,
And
that brings the question of why was aligning with Orion so important for them?
which is a whole nother rabbit hole, right?
It's aliens.
We should do a part 2 on that.
Do the ancient aliens hair guy. But yeah, it's wild because with this evidence we also see that there happens to be a perfect synchronization with the entire theory that there was such a global civilization that existed pre-ice age during the precession of the equinoxes, which is also happens to be that exact same time period in history, 13,000 to 15,000 years ago. Can that be a coincidence? Can it be a coincidence when we see these structures in Mexico, in Central America, in South America, in Egypt, and in India, and also parts of South Asia, all matching the same building techniques, mirroring the specific same constellation, and all syncing to the exact same time period?
Can I put my tinfoil hat on for a moment?
Sure.
To me, the reason why that wouldn't be common knowledge, to have a world so succinct and with the astrological, astronomical mathematics so advanced, so as to have everyone, every like big civilization build these same pyramid-like structures aligned with that constellation, shows that we were working together in harmony and likely for the greater good. And I feel like that had to be erased, the history of the fact that we did that it was possible, that it has
That
happened
it
on
was
Earth.
possible. Exactly.
Mhm.
That it was not only possible, but that it happened. That it already happened. That's the crazy thing, that it already happened. And it seems like what the period of humanity that we're in right now makes such a reality seem improbable and impossible at times, right? And I think what's so absolutely revolutionary about this information is that exact same conclusions have. That's the exact same conclusion when I closed this 800-page book that I had. If the world knew this, how would we move?
Mm-hmm.
What crazy changes we could see with this evidence alone? What shift in consciousness we could have as a society, seeing where we have come from, that it is not just some future utopia, but that it was a real existence already, something that we were living in, something that our ancestors were living in, and something that we have sadly forgotten or have been erased from, removed from, right? And so, yeah, not only do these temples, these pyramids, these structures around the world sync up perfectly with this precision of Orion, with the precession of the equinoxes. Actually, many of them also map the precision of the equinoxes. I forgot to mention that, which is a whole nother crazy reality, because again, the level of astronomy and astrology you would have to know and understand in order to do that. And this is at a time where there was no technology, there was no telescopes,
Caveman.
this was supposed to be cavemen. Yes, let's give that contrast. This is supposed to be a non-humanoid. This isn't even Homo sapiens yet. All right? According to mainstream narrative, not even fully developed Homo sapiens yet. So the precision, the planning, the knowledge of the cosmos. And one last thing I'll talk about as we transition is the people, the deities. There is something extremely chilling, in a good way, that is mirrored throughout all of these holy sites, these sacred sites, which is the depiction of specific beings. Now, these specific beings, according to historians and archaeologists, there's such specific overlap that it is beyond coincidence. Okay, it's not just like, oh, cool, they're all a bunch of bearded men. That could be a generalization. No, it actually couldn't, because the societies at this time, let's give the example of Teotihuacan, Mexico, or in Bolivia specifically, because this is a really good example. The native people of the Americas do not grow facial hair. I don't know if people know this, but like ethnically, they do not have beards. And the beings that are depicted in these very places are shown 3 feet taller than the average person would have been at the time, with extremely long facial hair, with light coloring, like a white type of beard or coloring, and have very, very, very specific iconography. Examples of this would be even like Quetzalcoatl is an example of this. Many of the beings that are depicted in these temples in Central and South America happen to be almost exact images of the rishis, the Saptarishis of India, that are shown in Indian temples in Angkor Wat, Cambodia, and that happen to be very mirrored to the Egyptian deities as well. So there is
Sekhmet
so
is
much.
Kali.
Yeah.
I was just studying that this morning, and I was like, this is the same being. Oh my God, this is insane.
Mm-hmm. So we're seeing, astronomical, astrological precision, connections to specific constellations and the precession of the equinoxes. We're seeing technologies used to carve and construct these temples that are extremely parallel and extremely advanced. We're seeing cultural connections across the deities that are shown, the myths of the flood. I haven't even gotten into that yet, which I won't keep rambling. But the myths of the flood are depicted in every single one of these stories. The same exact story, the same story across cultures that shouldn't have been in contact, according to modern history, should not have been in any contact with each other, have the exact same stories depicted in these places that were constructed at the exact same time. So all of this to say, humans have been living in advanced levels of connection and harmony for much longer than we are being told. And I think there's a lot to chew on there. So over to you, Lauren. Tell us more about Egypt and Göbekli Tepe, because those are some crazy, crazy ones to look at.
Yeah, so those are my two favorites. I mean, there's so many to choose from, honestly, but those are my two favorites. I'm also going to be talking about the White Sands footprint that was found most recently, which proves that there was humans here in North America much, 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 much sooner. But I'm just going to barely touch on it, just proving that like we're much older. And you have to remember, like some things that I want to preface this with is history is written by the victors, right? So you're only getting one side of a story when you're getting history, especially when you're receiving history from government funded sources, right? That's
Like
why,
like schools.
like public schools, that's a government funded, which is great. Like it's wonderful. It's helped create a basic standard for what we need to know as society, but there's so much more beyond that. And beyond what is standardized, and what is standardized it fits very well within the narrative of the country that we live in, the culture and society that we live in, the time that we live in, and the religion that our country claims. Okay, that changes a lot, a lot. So,
The victors don't just get to write their success story as history, they also write it to stay in power.
right, exactly, exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. You're only getting one side of the story, you're only getting one portion of the story, and that story almost always fits the narrative of what they want or what serves them the best, right? So the White Sands footprint is really, really cool because it's dated, estimated at 23,000 years ago, which is again about double to triple how long they say we've been around. It's the earliest marker of human presence in North America.
Was that the one that they just did? They were just talking about, and it was in North America, right? Yeah.
Correct, correct. And so what a lot of the really amazing philosophers, archaeologists, historians, and theorists believe, close to Mr. Hancock or Dr. Hancock, is the that impact, that global impact. Something happened that disconnected us from these ancient, very advanced civilizations that are our ancestors, right? Which makes it so cool, because that just reminds us, like, something that I want us to take away from all of this isn't like, oh my God, we're being lied to, or oh my God, we're being misled. Like we are, but at the same time, this helps us remember that we weren't just like cavemen that got lucky. We come from a very resilient, a very ancient, very wise lineage of the human race, right? So, yeah, the White Sands footprint is very interesting to me. And it predates this impact that we talk about that possibly was that global cataclysm that caused the flooding, ice age, of like a lot of things. And then we have Göbekli Tepe, which rises immediately post cataclysm. So I believe that this was the ancient civilization survivors who survived that cataclysm, who were like, oh my goodness, we need to preserve this wisdom and knowledge, because it was created, used, and then intentionally covered, preserved on purpose, right? And then we also have the Giza Pyramids, which are modern dated, like modernly accepted to be, um, let's see, I think it's
Yeah,
23,000 years
20
ago.
2300, I thought.
Yes, right.
Yeah, 2300, which is
Right.
so insane. Sorry.
Right. No, it's okay. But
But they know they say the Sphinx is 5 to 8,000 years old.
right, but
They're right
they
next to each other.
actually, but the water erosion shows that it's actually much older. So I'm not saying, and I would like to preface this for all of our Egyptian listeners, okay? Because I know um, some of our friends in Egypt were very passionate about saying Egyptians built the pyramid. No aliens, Egyptians. And I kind of agree, right? It was just the ancient civilizations, their ancestors who had this ancient wisdom and knowledge, these ancient technologies, if you will, that made a lot of things possible that we believed or have been conditioned to believe are not possible.
Well, what if the aliens worked with and gave the information
I
and
think
were
that
the
we
Egyptians?
Well, remember in the Christian text where it talks about the angels living among the people?
Hmm. I mean,
That's
there is too much evidence depicted in these places, including in the hieroglyphics of Egypt, in the temple carvings of India that are 7,000 years old, that
Mhm.
show non-humanoid beings.
Right.
Now, I think it's I think it's something that we always have to be like, hey, we don't know what we don't know, so we can't assume that. Oh, was it another species entirely? Was it them working in harmony with us? But surely there was contact. That much, I
Hmm.
think, we can say there was
Hmm.
contact.
Yeah, and I feel like once the cataclysms happened, there was a separation, there was a disconnect of some sort, and then there was also this intentional cover up and intentional misleading. We had bits and pieces of it. We could have worked through that, but I think that the winners, the victors of whoever began to control history, obviously. That didn't serve them for everybody to have that information again. It would probably serve them to keep it for themselves, which is why we have ancient hidden wisdom that we find that we can get glimpses of from different cultures, different practices. But yeah, so mainstream media is curated, written by the victors, and so the pyramids are a great example of scrutinizing what we've been told versus what we can actually see. So the pyramids were claimed to be tombs from 2500 BCE, so during Pharaoh Khufu's reign. But there are zero hieroglyphics inside the Great Pyramid, which is super unusual. It's unheard of for Egyptian tombs. There's no mummies there. There's no treasure ever discovered inside. And the so-called sarcophagus that they say was placed in there in the king's chamber is too large to fit through the passageway. So this is suggesting that it was placed during construction or it already existed. So they created that large sarcophagus inside the king's chamber was placed there before they created anything else. So another thing about this is the engineering anomalies. The blocks, each block weighs up to 80 tons. So modern cranes would struggle to place these things. Like we could not create the pyramid right now if we wanted.
That's 160,000 pounds.
Correct. That's insane. So it's also, as you were talking about with the astrological alignment, it is aligned almost perfectly to true north. Um, it holds the golden ratio, and pi and the speed of light are encoded into its dimensions. So it's got the speed of light in there versus the pyramid coordinates are the pyramid coordinates match the speed of light. So
Wow.
exactly where it is the speed of light. It's not four-sided, it's eight-sided. Okay, and each side of the base is the same length to within a fraction of an inch. This is impossible without advanced tools.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying just aliens, I'm saying advanced knowledge, advanced wisdom, and created long before modern history says it is. The Great Pyramid is aligned with the Orion's belt, echoing the ancient Egyptian mythologies and the concept of as above, so below, built on powerful ley lines and energetic grid points within the earth. So it literally lines up on top of the ley lines that.
It's supposed to be the throat chakra of the earth is the
Mhm,
Great Pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
mhm. And the internal designs functions as a resonance chamber. So some believe that it amplified sound or frequency for healing or consciousness work. I personally experienced this in the King's Chamber. We did a meditation from the book of, they call it death, but it's the book of life, actually. But we did a meditation and we followed that meditation with ohms, which sounded the craziest I've ever heard in my life. I can't wait for you to experience this, Priscilla. Um, but yeah, the granite inside the King's Chamber contains high levels of quartz, which are capable of storing and transmitting energy.
And information.
Yes.
All the chips on your computer, on your phone are quartz crystal.
Yes, exactly. So they found that they can hold more information on a crystal than they can on other material. So the broader impacts of this are ancient cultures across the globe, like the Mayans, the Incans, the Vedics, the Aboriginals. They all speak of star ancestors and advanced wisdom. They all have this history of like, yes, we have ancient ancestors who connected with the star nations. The star race is what they
Mm-hmm.
call it. Sky people. They have different names for it.
Yeah.
Similar pyramid structures appear globally, implying a shared ancient knowledge or origin, like Savannah was talking about. We were all talking. We were all communicating. We were all sharing information. We all had access to the same information.
What if those matching structures were the like communication points?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a whole theory about that. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. The suppression of this knowledge serves a purpose, right? It's disempowerment. If we think, oh, we're just these dumb monkeys that
Mm-hmm.
slowly evolved over time, like this, if this information is confirmed and accepted, it destroys all of that. It destroys the foundation of our history and knowledge, basically, as a current civilization, right? So things that we can think about or to question the narratives that we've been given. Who would this serve? Like reverse engineer this shit, right? Who would it serve for me to believe this? What purpose is it serving? Who is it helping? Um, Trust your intuitive knowing. Your bones remember what textbooks forget. Our DNA, it holds wisdom, it holds knowledge, it holds power, and we have information at our fingertips. Now, granted, we've almost been overflown with information, which we've talked about in past podcasts about how, sometimes they put out so much information and misinformation so that it's hard to pick and choose. But I really feel when I read something, I don't just go off of this. I do confirm, however, with evidence and facts. But I me listening to my inner yes has never been wrong. When I hear something and I'm like, that's it, that's true, I know that's true, I can feel it, and then I will go make sure and find the facts. But more than not, when I listen to myself, the facts are there to be found, right?
I mean, I think
And
too, when you go to these places, like we kind of talked about last episode
mhm,
about Egypt, like something does happen. If you're even slightly open to that
mhm.
possibility, you feel something, you experience something, and that is a different kind of, right? That's a different kind of knowing,
Mm-hmm.
a different kind of confirmation, but it's also important. And I think we can absolutely receive that when we're physically around these creations, these places, this history, and
Mm-hmm.
why so much of it is not accessible to us as well is, I think, for that reason.
Right. Right. Well, a big reason why the mainstream downplays it is because the acknowledgement of this stuff would force us to rewrite human history.
Mm-hmm.
It undermines slow evolution narrative. It opens the door to ancient high consciousness, energy, technology, spiritual knowledge, and all of that is very like taboo. Why?
Mm. Yeah, I
Why?
mean, it opens the door. I think the technology part is almost the most significant in this age
Mm-hmm.
of like the why would this be hidden. I think almost entirely ties to the technology of it all,
Mm-hmm.
because it has to do with technologies that relate to free energy, that work with sound, light, vibration, things that
Right.
um, we have been studying as governments for a long time, and that the
Mm-hmm.
public has never been given access to,
Mm-hmm.
even when things are just rediscovered, I should say, or found out again.
Right.
And there's one thing I wanted to mention real quick. I think the most mind blowing thing I remember from Fingerprints of the Gods was this one. Just, I don't know, it did something to my brain. They have found out through carbon dating that the pyramids were built from the top down. Can we just take a dramatic pause there? Because what the fuck? They were built from
How
the
did they conclude that? Like, what was the evidence
It's got to be that
to?
the stones at the top are
this,
older.
the stones at the top were older and placed first. They can see this based on the way that the stones fit into one another and the dating of the stones.
This is
The
wild.
top of the Great Pyramid was placed first. Not
I didn't
only
even
that,
know that.
not only that, there used to be a covering on it. Did you know that? There used to be
Yeah.
Yes, I did
yeah,
know that. The
there used to be
limestone.
there used to be some material.
Which
I
is
don't know.
I know the material was like highly conductive, so like
Uh-huh.
great for holding electricity.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I honestly think that there was a high likelihood that that material, this is of course my own theory. Let me preface with that, but I feel that the material that was covering it was a element we do not have on Earth.
Hmm.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's like you have this really conductive metal or material on the top, and then the rest of the pyramid is quartz crystal, which is a piezoelectric and responds with movement to electricity,
Hmm.
which is very interesting. My personal theory of how they built the pyramids is they were able to control frequency and sound in a way that picking up these extremely heavy blocks was much easier.
Hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's
That's what I think
almost
too.
one of the only conclusions possible
Yeah.
with the way that they were constructed.
Yeah. So basically, what we're saying
So apparently,
is apparently everything you've been told is a lie.
don't listen to anything you're told, and apparently that life is a lie.
Well, and we're not even saying like throw out history altogether. Just understand that it's not, you can't just take everything and be like, okay, yes, this is exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the stuff that's taught to us as fact is a theory.
Yep.
It's a theory that a bunch of people were like, yeah, I think that too. I
including
agree.
including evolution,
Yep.
Including this one.
including the Big Bang.
This
Hmm.
one shook me. This one got me shooketh.
Shook it.
You know how you learn in like second grade that the layers of the Earth's crust, like that there's the crust, there's like magma, blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
all
We
the way up.
just disproved that.
You know that that's literally a theory. They've never proven that that's true remotely. They
So
have never
like oh,
proven there is magma in the core of Earth ever.
a
So
Ever.
week
the
ago
the inner
they
earth people
disproved
are
that.
real then is what you're saying.
Oh, I know for a fact there's an inner Earth, but
That's the whole nother podcast.
uh, about a week ago they proved that there's water stored underneath
Yes.
the ocean in like a plasma-esque like
Whoa.
material.
Larger than the ocean, more volume water than the entire oceans of the surface.
I knew it.
That's so cool to me. See, and that's what I'm saying. Like, just
That was a week
stay
ago.
open, remain open. Just know that not everything you're told is fact, that you're told is fact is fact. Question everything, even the things that you believe,
And do your own
especially the
Easy
things you
no.
believe.
do your own
Yeah.
data collection, test your own shit, question
Hmm.
your own biases and your own conclusions, and again go back and keep doing it.
They're telling the public about that. What are they not telling them? What are we not being told from all those new discoveries under the ocean?
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Why did we stop exploring the oceans? Why do we know more about outer space than the surface of the ocean?
Because we know, and we're not allowed to go back in there.
Facts.
They
Whew,
said stay out.
that's a oh man, that's a whole
They
nother
said
I
you
know we have
keep
so
your
many
land shit
backup
on
episodes.
land.
that's a whole nother one. And honestly, I'm telling you, that's one I remember like 10 years ago, I would have thought that's the most far-fetched one of the theories like there could be.
Yeah.
And today, I think it's one of the least far-fetched because of how much I have collected myself.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, there's like anyway.
I
That's a
mean,
whole thing.
The CIA has released documents that we live in a fucking hologram. Okay, like, come on. If you don't know, you don't want to know at this point. You
It's
know what I
public
mean?
information.
That's so true.
But I
Um,
understand, like, being programmed to the point to absolutely not even looking into it because it sounds so ridiculous. Like, I understand that too because I was there, and it just took a big
me too.
explosion of my life for me to be like, oh, maybe it's not. Maybe
Well,
it's
here's the
not
thing.
real.
It's terrifying. It is because it
Yeah.
challenges your entire reality. That's why people aren't willing to go there mentally because the brain protects itself, the mind protects
Right.
itself. And it
Right.
is utterly world shattering. It is.
It's a
It
lot to unpack. It is.
is world shattering. It changes your view of
And
life, of you.
and then you ask like, what's my role in this? And that's incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
easy to get frozen, you know?
It's
Okay.
easy to want to quit everything altogether and be like, fuck the
Yeah.
matrix too.
Mm-hmm.
I think
And
you go through phases, right? Like denial, anger, bartering, all of the all of those layers have to go through.
Depression
Yeah.
and
guys,
eventually acceptance.
so Savannah, I think it's time to go down the parallel rabbit hole of what what is this lost history of the United States, of the connections here where a lot of us are from, and what we can find around us, what evidences we can see or find around us.
Yeah, I'm about to make this a lot more personal and a lot more recent as the 1800s. If you're listening from the States, I'm talking about the land that you live on. And I'm putting on I really should have brought tinfoil. I'm putting on my tinfoil hat here because I want to talk about the lost civilization of Tartaria. Are either of you familiar?
I've heard of it, but know nothing else. Just the
Only
name.
through you. Only through you. So take it up. Take it away.
So the symbol of Tartaria was the griffin. And it was not just in the States, it was a global civilization that existed as recently as the 1800s that was highly advanced, but also peaceful and esoteric, that had architectural mastery and free energy technology that was erased from our official timeline. Again, I'm talking about 200, 150, 200 years ago. And what are the proofs? And this is why I feel like this is where I involve the Freemasons. If you don't know about the Freemasons, they are a secret, sometimes considered occult society of usually traditionally only men or males who are masons or come from a lineage of mason. And a mason is one who lays stone and builds things. And it's kind of like, why would the people who literally lay stones and build things have a secret society? And I feel like it's connected to the fact that you can see what has actually happened through the older buildings around you, around your town, in the downtown areas. But people don't think about that, right? So some like key proofs from us with our tinfoil hats about Tartaria, which go to Reddit about it, go to YouTube about it. There is a channel called My Lunch Break that I've watched almost every single video of, that has
That's a good resource. That's a good
yes,
resource.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos of the proof to prove and back up what I'm talking about here today. But the buildings, and they're almost always made of stone, not brick, not drywall, certainly not wood, that are present throughout the US and a bit in Europe and Asia. I want you to think of like Sagrada Familia, Notre Dame, the cathedral in Cologne, Germany, where we see these massive, unbelievably ornate architecture that have no real credible record of construction, often with very large doors. Some conspiracy theorists, which I guess I'll call myself that for this chat today, think that it's because humans or other beings like giants existed. These buildings, we cannot reconstruct them today if we tried with our greatest technologies that we have. So how did they get there? So I'll talk just for the States, maybe like the Eastern Seaboard. I'm in Detroit. There are buildings like this downtown that I have personally gone and inspected out of my own curiosity, looking for the tells that that YouTube channel details. These buildings on their Wikipedia pages, all these pages look almost identical in their story. You have the word founded, created, right? All of these buildings were founded. Never is the word built used. They were founded, they were found. And if there are any public record photographs of these buildings in construction, the photos are never like of a half-built building or as it's being built. It's always a building that's already built with scaffolding on the outside of it. Never true building phases. And in these Wikipedia pages, they're always, the contract for the architect to build it is always won in some sort of competition by a man who has no public record of his existence, with the most generic name possible, who then goes and founds the building. And most of these recounts of these buildings that exist and that have like a name for themselves because they're very old and generally prominent in these downtown or town center areas. I'm thinking about downtown Detroit specifically for what's close to my home. They're in these Wikipedia stories, fires. The Great Chicago Fire, the Great San Francisco Fire, or just this one building in particular burned. And then it was restored.
Like Notre Dame, right? Didn't that happen also in Notre Dame?
That happened, I want to say, 3 years ago. Yeah. And they're not having a very easy time at all reconstructing the parts that were lost. There's also this theory, so we see in a lot of Victorian era or buildings from the 1800s, although again, in this theory, believing they're much older, there's this theory of, we see a lot of dome structures. When do we ever see dome structures built anymore? And often they're made of copper, and they have like a little jutting out, like pointy part, that these building tops would pull energy from the ether, as Nikola Tesla described in a lot of his workings, that, using a dome with conductive energy over it. And this one's kind of out there, but I think it's fun. These domes always have this like pointy part on top, and there's a lot of theories for what that was used for in this like very recent but lost and erased civilization. And many believe it was for common everyday air travel, such as blimps. I'm a big blimp believer, guys. And that you'd almost like fly up, hook your blimp onto the little pokey part and charge it. And the energy was free, and then you'd like go about your day. There is a building like this in downtown Dearborn, about 20 minutes from where I live. And every time I go, I'm just staring at that thing. Like, why is it shaped like that? And it's from the 1800s. So then we have to talk about the world fairs. Pete, you look like you want to say something.
Oh no, I'm just excited to hear about the world, like more about the world fairs, because I remember I was so fascinated by them in regular school. Like they were such a weird, interesting thing.
Hmm. They are said in this Tartarian lost civilization of Tartaria theory to have been a lot of powerful people and government leaders meeting up to begin a cultural cover up. There were some very strange things at these world fairs, which modern history does record as these fairs did happen, such as orphan trains. Such as, have you guys ever heard of that? Lots and lots and lots of newborn babies just kind of being there on display. So, in this theory, there is a bit of, in this, as we covered up what had recently happened. I know I sound so crazy right now. I'm trying to condense so much knowledge into just the gist of the theory, but there is so much so much evidence I have sifted through my own because I'm not easily convincible person. I like theories, but if I'm actually going to come on a podcast and talk about one, I will have done my research about it heavily. Um, yeah, so there's within this theory, there's this idea that we have brought over into the new after this cultural historical cover up and reset again as early as 150 to 200 years ago that we populated the states with a bunch of, for lack of a better term, white babies that were orphans. And this is so interesting to me because only in the United States do people not know really their heritage. They just know they're kind of like vaguely white, which white is a social construct. You're not white, you're German, French, English, Romanian, right? Greek. But with this cultural reset, we have this idea born of whiteness, which is, ooh, we're starting to see how that's connecting to the chaos currently in our political climate. And that these babies were adopted and put out into the world and showcased at the World Fair as like the new generation. And it starts to sound very dystopian. There's a lot going on at these World Fairs, more than I can get into today. But if you want to, if you're like, okay, I'll look at the buildings, also just read into what was happening in these World Fairs, what actually events were happening at the fairs. And there were a lot of messed up things like, hey, here's a bunch of freaking babies that we just have.
That's
So,
really, really bizarro, that part about the baby.
yeah. And also
Honestly,
with
that really creeps me out. Like, not a vibe.
those babies being at the World Fair is in the modern narrative. Those are things that are like commonly
Mm,
accepted,
accepted, yeah. Wow.
which is interesting that they let that part in.
Hmm.
And I have to touch, of course, on AI as part of this theory. AI is, in my belief, much, much older than what we've been told. Right now in our world, it seems to be just rolling out, but I believe it to be a lot older than that and heavily involved in this cultural reset that could have happened um, with the fall of Tartaria and the recreation of our new world.
So Sav, was Tartaria supposed to be before, like, was that before the US was discovered by
Yes,
Columbus?
yes, and it kind of links with the footprint that we were talking about. Like there have been people here forever and ever, earlier than they could have walked over from the Bering Strait, right, from Russia into
Hmm.
Alaska.
What I would love to know is Native people's perspective on these buildings or these structures, because of course they were the ones that were actually here and have the oral tradition. Would love
Mhm.
to know what they say or think about it, you know?
We have a couple in our school we could ask. I'm thinking about Emiria.
Hmm.
So To conclude, I believe that these stories that we have that are so repetitive were created by AI, that the entire modern narrative was written by AI. It is incredibly bland and repetitive. And the next time that you go into your downtown area, you see stone buildings, I just want you to take a moment to find the building's name, look it up on Wikipedia, see when it was built, and then ask yourself, do I really believe this was built then? There is the world's largest Masonic temple in downtown Detroit, which is what started my dig into this theory, because I went to it for a winter fair 2 Christmases ago, and I found myself in what felt like a medieval castle, of which I've been to many. Been to a lot of medieval castles, and yet it was said to have been built in 1927, when we didn't even have railroads here. This giant monolith building made of giant stones was said to have been built, what is that, 98 years ago? The way that the stone is aged, how giant it is, the fact that no other buildings downtown look like that, save for cathedrals, it just kind of, I didn't believe it. And that sent me down this rabbit hole. These buildings will almost always, and it's a Masonic temple nonetheless, right? These buildings will always, when you find them, they will always be either a church, such as a cathedral, a government building, or a bank, or a Masonic temple.
Very interesting.
There's so much more, and I know I sound like a rambling, crazy person, but just
No, when you try to cover so much, like it's easy to feel that way because we are just like dumping so much information on you guys. But see what interests pique your interest and go research those things. There's a lot out there.
there's these unexplained architectural features. I'm thinking of the Empire State Building with all of these pointy parts, the spires, perhaps to act as docking or mast points for airships. What the heck? Why does it look like that? Why did they build it like that? That was
it's so fascinating. Even the building, you remember from the NIA ad that I filmed in Chicago, like looks like, you even said that it looks like it's part of the old world.
And that was a temple, right?
It was a church for, oh my god, what's it called? I'm blanking out now.
But it was a religious building. It's always a bank, a government building, or a religious building.
Yeah, it was a religious building, which was really interesting.
You can't buy them. You can't own them. They're always held up by literally the matrix. Banks, money, religion, belief and dogma, government, power and control.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, huh? And man, we didn't even talk about the Vatican, but that's a whole...
Oh man, I'm going to the Vatican in August on my honeymoon.
Can't wait to hear your findings.
I'm gonna see the Pope.
Very nice.
So if you want to look more into what the crap just spewed out of my mouth, go to my lunch break. He has hundreds of videos that have evidence after evidence after evidence of what I'm talking about here. And I mean, it just, obviously I love everything that you guys shared today, but when we think about something 150 to 200 years ago, and it on our land where we live in the States, which is not our land, but it feels so much more personal. It feels so much more triggering. And for me, it makes me feel so much more unsafe.
And also there's also, outside of all the buildings and things you were talking about connected to the actual like current United States territories, there are really wild things that we're starting to uncover geologically and in terms of like temples and ancient megalithic structures that are actually talked about in Ancient Apocalypse. Graham Hancock has a show now that he talks about all of the findings of the Americas, not just what I was talking about originally and what Lauren was talking about.
So good.
More relevant here. It's really, really phenomenally done. Keanu Reeves even makes a cameo, which is hilarious. But if you want to start getting more into like what the heck this really means and see evidences yourself, I really recommend watching that show. There's 2 seasons. One's more international, and then one is more about the Americas. And or reading any of Graham Hancock's books. They're phenomenal.
Remember, throughout all of this, keep your feet on the ground, okay? We don't have to swing from one extreme to the other, from ignorance, how we've been brought up, to taking drastic measures or distancing yourself from your human life, but just knowledge is power. And if so many people on earth knew what we were capable of, free energy, living in harmony, as early as perhaps 200 years ago, it will be over for these hoes.
My final words for everyone listening is kind of on that note. I think it's so important to evaluate what is important here. And my own perspective is that when I came into all of this information and different ways of viewing the world and of history and of the powers that be, I made a really important conscious decision to not focus on the who, they, them, powerlessness, out to get us, why is this happening, and more so on the what. And what does this mean for me? And what can I do about it? And the empowering side of it. And it's really easy to go down the disempowering side of it. And I have never seen that work for anybody. So I think what I would advise in conclusion is not to get hung up on the who is doing this and why and who are they and what are they doing, because it doesn't fucking matter. Like it doesn't matter. What matters is, what are you going to do with this? And what does this mean for us consciously? And how can we as individuals change our world with this knowledge going forward?
I love that. So good, you guys. This episode was bomb.
We'll
Super
link the
fun.
additional resources in the show notes, such as my
Yeah.
lunch break, what's that? Eyes of God,
Fingerprints of the Gods.
Fingerprints of the Gods.
Yeah.
Sorry. The show, what's it called? Ancient Apocalypse. We'll
Yeah.
link all this additional citations in the show notes for you to take a deep dive. But hopefully your eyes are a little bit more opened than when we started. And that's really just why we're here.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us this time.
See you all on our next episode